Ontario just passed Doug Ford's controversial Bill 60, and the reaction has been explosive. Some landlords think it fixes the system, and many tenants are scared that it's the end of their housing security. And honestly, there's a ton of misinformation flying around out there. A lot of people are panicking over things that simply aren't true. The bill, called the Fighting Delays Building Faster Act, has technically just passed its third reading in the Ontario legislature, which means it's effectively approved and will come into force once it receives royal assent. Ipso facto, it's been passed, the rules just haven't come into effect quite yet. In this video, I'm going to break down what Bill 60 actually means for both tenants and landlords in Ontario, because the reality is much different from some of the stuff you've been hearing on social media, I'm sure. Starting with a big one, the personal use evictions, or the Form N12. Today, if a tenant is in the middle of a fixed term lease, they cannot be evicted for personal use. That protection stays in place. Once the lease ends, it automatically becomes month to month, and they can only be served the N12 if the owner, their immediate family, or a buyer of the property needs to move into the property for their own personal use. They must give 60 days notice and pay 1 month's compensation. What Bill 60 changes is it just gives a second option for the landlord or the buyer to give 120 days notice and not have to give that 1 month's compensation. The option to still give 60 days notice with the 1 month stays in place. A lot of people have been twisting this into a landlord can evict anybody at the end of a lease for any reason, and that's simply not true. Ending a fixed term lease does not give a landlord unlimited power. The tenancy continues month to month after the lease, and any eviction would have to go through the landlord-tenant board, and it must fit the rules for personal use or buyer's personal use. So no, a landlord can't say your lease is done, get out. That's not how it works. There was a proposal originally with this bill that would say that at the end of a lease, the landlord could evict a tenant or increase the rent or whatever the case is. But that was thrown out quickly. And I think that a lot of people have grabbed onto that, and that's become their whole reason to protest this bill. Section 2, non-payment of rent, or the N4 form. This is getting the loudest reaction, non-payment of rent, as it should. Because I think this is one of the main reasons where all of this stems from. Right now, if a tenant doesn't pay rent, the landlord can serve an N4, then they have to wait 14 days to actually submit it to the LTB. What changes under Bill 60 is that 14 days becomes 7 days. And this is where people started yelling that tenants can be kicked out within a week. No, they can't. The landlord can just submit the eviction notice now after 7 days. The LTB is still working through massive delays. We're talking 3, 4, 5, 6 months just to get to a hearing. Shortening the filing window does not shorten the eviction timeline. It just allows a landlord to get into the queue a week sooner. I've gone through this process myself, and I've seen it countless times. Whereas by the time we get to a hearing, say 6, 8, 9 months later, the tenant has either cleared up the arrears or just moved out and not showed up for the appointment. Then the whole thing gets dismissed and the tenant walks away scot-free. I don't know why there's controversy around why that shouldn't be the case. So the idea that Bill 60 turns Ontario into a 7-day eviction province is just not true. And the fact is, places like Alberta, they do have a 2-week eviction process just like that. So we are massively on the other end of the spectrum. Section 3 is consistent late payment, or the Form N8. This is another notice that still exists, Form N8, and doesn't get talked about a lot, and that is consistently being late with rent payment. What Bill 60 does is tightens up what consistently late means. This will tighten up whether adjudicators can argue whether or not being late 2 weeks every month is acceptable or not. This isn't new power, it just brings clarity to an already existing rule. Section 4, tenants must raise issues before the hearing. This is one of the biggest procedural changes. A tenant can't show up to a hearing and drop a bunch of new complaints that the landlord's never even heard of. This used to cause enormous delays. A case would get thrown out, restarted, and reset the timeline by months. With Bill 60, tenants now have to raise those issues before the hearing. And it appears that they'll also have to have paid, looks like 50% of the arrears before the hearing in order to be able to bring up these new complaints. This is meant to reduce surprise and frivolous complaints brought up at a hearing just to drag out the timeline of the eviction. Section 5, appeals are now limited to 15 days down from 30. This makes the whole system move faster because appeals were being used just to stall the process for months. Section 6 is limiting eviction order postponements. Once the LTB issues an eviction order, Bill 60 limits how long the actual enforcement can be delayed. We don't know the timeline exactly on this, but if you've ever had to wait for a sheriff in Ontario, you know it can take quite a bit of time. Section 7 is adding a budget for more sheriffs to speed things like this up. Some regions only have one sheriff handling all evictions, so it could take 6, 8, or 10 weeks for them to get around to that address to carry out the enforcement of the eviction. Section 8 is public access to LTB decisions. This is actually huge for transparency on both sides. There is a website called Open Room that landlords can use to look up delinquent tenants when they are screening tenants for their properties, but it is limited. Now both landlords and tenants can see each other's history online. Good tenants benefit from this because they can show that they've had no issues, and good landlords benefit as well because they can avoid having nightmare tenants. The truth is, the process that I had to go in the past where the tenant didn't pay for 8 or 9 months, and then we went to the LTB and then they didn't show up, they moved out the next day. She then went online and slandered my name, even though I had done nothing but try to help her through this process. So something like this would show that I, as a landlord, don't have any actual complaints against me, contrary to what this tenant wanted people to think, even though she was the one who wasn't paying rent and didn't show up to the hearing whatsoever. So the only people who should be wary of this are those who plan to abuse the system. So let's clear up a few of the misconceptions that are floating around about this right now. Number one being landlords can just end a lease for no reason now. That's false. They still need a legitimate LTB approved reason. Number two, rent control is gone. That's false. Rent control still applies the same way it did to pre-2018 built buildings. Number three, Bill 60 gives landlords unlimited power. Not true. The LTB still has the authority over all evictions. Number four, tenants will be homeless in 7 days. The LTB is still months behind and Bill 60 does nothing to change that. So, should you be worried? Well, yeah, if you plan on not paying your rent and destroying your landlord's property. You should probably be a little worried about this. If you've been paying your rent on time, even if you've been there for 15 years and your rent is half of what the market should be, nothing's going to change for you. Bill 60 doesn't magically fix housing, and it doesn't destroy tenants' rights either. What it does is in part tighten up some of the processes where people were able to abuse them in the past. Hopefully it'll speed up a system that's painfully slow and create some clarity around rules so both sides know where they stand. I'm curious, did any of this surprise you? Did you think that some of the myths that I busted were true and now you've changed your mind, or are you still dead set against it? Let me know your thoughts below, and if I can ever be of any help, whether to pick my brain as a tenant or a landlord, feel free to reach out. There's a link there as well. Till then, I'll see you on the next one.